All right, so today we're going to dive into something, pretty interesting. I think a lot of people have probably heard of fasting,
Yeah,
but we're not talking about like the trendy intermittent fasting or anything like
right.
that. We're really looking at it from a spiritual perspective.
Yeah.
Abstaining primarily from food for spiritual reasons.
Absolutely. And what I think is so fascinating about this topic is the range of perspectives we have.
Yeah.
We've got a YouTube video here from Impact Video Ministries that kind of lays out like a general Christian approach to fasting.
Okay.
And then we're also going to be looking at, the Catholic practice of fasting during Lent, pulling some insights from a YouTube channel called A Catholic Mom's Life, and then an article from Hallow.
Yeah, a good mix, like a really broad,
Mm.
Christian approach, and then something very, very specific.
Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, our goal today is to kind of like navigate these different viewpoints, right?
Right.
And try to, pull out the core principles, the purpose behind it, the guidelines, maybe.
Mhm.
Give our listeners a really clear understanding without getting too bogged down.
Yeah, a nuanced understanding.
Yeah, exactly.
For sure.
When I was first watching that Impact Video Ministries video, they talked about fasting as like a way to power up spiritually.
Oh,
And I
interesting.
was like, oh, that's kind of a cool way to put it.
Yeah, almost like an anime.
Yeah,
Nice
exactly.
to charge up your spiritual energy.
Right.
I like that.
Yeah. So that really piqued my interest right from the start.
Absolutely. And that seems to be like a central motivation that we see kind of echoed in all of these sources, right?
Mhm.
Like this idea of intentionally shifting our focus and
Mhm.
seeking a different kind of strength.
Yeah, I like that.
So let's start with that Christian perspective as presented by Impact Video Ministries.
Okay, cool.
They really lean into this whole powering up for spiritual growth thing.
Okay.
Their basic idea is by denying your, bodily desires, particularly hunger,
Yeah.
you create space to focus on your inner spiritual life. And they even suggest that, it can lead to like increased spiritual power.
Okay, so like almost like a tangible,
Yeah.
benefit in a way.
Right, exactly. And the speaker even shares his own experience of like a 7-day food fast
Wow.
where he felt like a heightened sensitivity to God's presence.
Okay.
But it's
Mm.
important to note, he presents that as a personal anecdote, not like a prescription.
Sure. Yeah, of course. Not everybody's going to have the same experience.
Right, exactly.
Or should, attempt to do that, especially without medical supervision or anything.
Absolutely.
Right.
Now, they break it down into like 4 key steps.
Okay.
The first step is to pick a purpose.
All right.
And they actually ground this in scripture, referencing Matthew chapter 4, verse 2,
That-
where Jesus fasts for 40 days and nights before beginning his ministry.
Oh, wow. Okay, so
Yeah.
right at the very beginning.
From the start.
Yeah.
So for them, it's not just like randomly skipping meals.
Yeah.
It's like intentionally setting aside time with a specific reason. They say these periods can range from, just missing one meal to 24 hours or even longer.
Wow. Okay, so a wide range.
Yeah, a big spectrum.
Yeah.
But they do give this important caveat.
Yeah.
Anyone considering a longer fast, definitely consult a doctor first,
Yeah, that's crucial.
especially if you have any health conditions.
Right.
So, safety first.
Yeah. Always good advice.
The video then connects Jesus's fast with choosing his disciples,
Okay.
implying fasting can help you get clarity.
When making big decisions.
Exactly. So they expand on the reasons for fasting to include, prayer needs,
Yeah.
cultivating spiritual discipline, really making it part of a broader spiritual life.
Right.
Interestingly, they also bring in Mark chapter 9, verse 29,
Okay.
and they mention a connection between fasting and addressing certain spiritual challenges.
It's like overcoming certain things.
Yeah, and it's really important to understand this is their interpretation of scripture.
Yeah.
It reflects a particular viewpoint within Christianity.
Right. Of course.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's not like a universal thing.
exactly.
Okay, cool.
But they consistently bring it back to that central purpose,
Yeah.
drawing nearer to God. That's like the overarching theme for them.
Right, that's the goal.
Exactly.
Right.
The second step, they say, is pretty straightforward. Stop eating.
Right. Just cut it out.
Basically. Yeah, they point back to Matthew chapter 4, verses 2 and 3,
Go ahead.
highlighting Jesus's hunger and temptations he faced after fasting.
Right. So even Jesus struggled with that.
Right, exactly. It's not
Yeah.
supposed to be easy.
Right.
But what's interesting here is their definition of biblical fasting.
Okay.
They say it's primarily abstaining from food.
Okay.
They address the idea of fasting from social media or distractions,
Right.
saying those might be sacrifices or things we offer to God,
Yeah.
but they don't consider it biblical fasting.
Oh, interesting.
They even reference the book of Daniel chapter 10, verses 2 and 3,
Okay.
which they interpret as mourning, not fasting from something other than food.
So it's very specific to food.
Right.
Very specific, yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
So that's a key distinction they make.
Yeah.
And they acknowledge that it's not easy.
Yeah.
There's physical hunger, mental cravings.
Right. Your body wants food.
Right.
It's natural.
Exactly. So their advice is simple. Drink water and pray.
When you're feeling those cravings.
When it gets tough, yeah.
Yeah.
Ask for God's help.
Yeah, I like that.
They even call food fasting like an exercise in dying to yourself.
Oh, wow. That's pretty intense.
Yeah, to foster deeper spiritual growth.
Okay, so it's not just about, the physical deprivation.
Right.
It's really about the spiritual.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right, their third step is keep it between you and God.
Keep it secret.
Kinda, yeah. It's based on Matthew chapter 6, verses 16 through 18,
Okay.
where Jesus advises against making a big show of fasting.
Right, so it's not about showing off.
Exactly. Yeah, the focus should be on that personal connection with God.
Okay.
They even give a tip for when people ask why you're not eating,
Which they probably will.
right? They say just deflect with I'll eat later.
Okay, just kind of brush it off.
Yeah. But they also say it's okay to be honest if someone directly asks,
Right.
but avoid any boasting.
Don't make it a thing.
Don't make it a spiritual badge of honor.
Right.
Yeah. So very much like humility focus,
Yeah.
inward, not outward.
Okay, I like that.
Their final step is pair fasting with prayer.
Okay, so it's not just about not eating.
It's not just deprivation.
Right.
It's about spiritual engagement.
Okay.
They cite several passages. Matthew 17.21, Acts 10.3, Acts 14.23, 1 Corinthians 7.5.
Okay, wow, so it's all over the place.
It's a recurring theme,
Yeah.
connecting fasting and prayer.
Okay.
They suggest using meal times for prayer and scripture study,
Okay.
and they highlight different types of prayer,
Right.
like asking God questions, silent reflection, seeking his will, listening.
So really actively using that time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They even quote Samuel Chadwick, "Hurry is the death of prayer."
Oh, wow, that's a good one.
Really powerful.
Yeah.
So it's about being present, unhurried in your communication with God.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So it's like a holistic practice,
Right.
physical and spiritual.
Okay.
Now, the speaker also shares personal examples.
Okay.
Times when he fasted for specific reasons like seeking direction, navigating relationships, or protection.
Oh, wow, so he really walks the walk.
Yeah, he puts it into practice.
Yeah.
And he ends with a message of hope for the listener,
Okay.
hoping you might experience a deeper connection with God through fasting
Yeah.
and a reminder of Jesus's love.
That's nice. It's a nice personal touch.
Very personal.
Yeah. Okay, so that's the general Christian approach.
Right.
We've got a good sense of that.
Yeah.
Now let's shift gears.
Right.
And look at the Catholic perspective,
Yeah.
specifically during Lent.
During Lent.
So we're going from this individual purpose-driven approach to something a little more structured.
Yes, much more structured and communal.
Yeah.
This is where we see the church's liturgical calendar come into play. Both sources we have here highlight Ash Wednesday and Good Friday as mandatory fasting days for Catholics.
Okay, mandatory, so you got to do it.
You got to do it.
Right.
And the definition of fasting on those days is pretty specific.
Okay.
1 full meal is allowed,
Okay.
and then 2 smaller meals that combined don't equal a full meal.
So it's not just like snacking all day.
No, definitely not.
Okay.
It's like 1 substantial meal and then 2 little ones.
Okay.
On top of that, there's also abstinence from meat
On those days.
on Ash Wednesday, Good Friday, and all Fridays during Lent.
So every Friday.
Every Friday.
Okay.
But fish is allowed.
Oh, okay, so it's not like all animal products.
No, just meat specifically.
But-
And things like eggs and dairy are fine.
Okay, so you can still have your cheese.
Cheese is good.
Yeah.
All right, good to know.
Now, the Catholic Mom's Life video also mentions no sweets on Ash Wednesday and Good Friday.
Oh, wow. So no chocolate, no ice cream.
No dessert, basically.
That's tough.
Yeah, really emphasizes the penitential nature of those
Yeah.
days. Right, like you're really supposed to feel it.
Exactly.
Okay.
The Hello article points out that some people might choose even more rigorous fasting.
Like, how much more rigorous can it get?
Well, like bread and water only,
Wow.
or even abstaining from food altogether.
Wow. Okay, so that's like next level.
Yeah, but they clarify that's not required by the church.
Okay, so it's like extra credit.
Yeah, basically.
No,
That's up to the individual.
yeah.
Both sources also mention situations where the rules might not apply.
Like what kind of situations?
Like if you're pregnant or nursing.
Right.
Or have a medical condition.
Of course.
They're not required to fast the same way.
Yeah, common sense should prevail.
Yeah, exactly. The Hallow article even quotes the USCCB.
Okay. The United States Conference of Catholic Bishops.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They emphasize that common sense should prevail.
Yeah.
No one should jeopardize their health.
Right.
So again, safety first.
Yeah, always.
Now, the purpose of fasting during Lent is to enter into a period of reflection and solidarity with Christ, to empty yourself of worldly pleasures.
So, like, really strip it back.
Yeah.
Okay.
Be filled with Christ and unified with God.
In preparation for Easter.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And Lent lasts for 40 days.
Okay. Same as Jesus' fast?
Same duration. Yeah, it begins on Ash Wednesday and goes until Holy Thursday.
Okay, so almost all the way to Easter.
Almost all the way.
Yeah.
But the Hallow article clarifies that Sundays aren't included in the 40 days.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so you get a break on Sundays.
A bit of a break, yeah.
Okay.
So that's different from the continuous 40-day fast we talked about earlier.
Right, that Jesus did.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Now, Fridays during Lent have slightly different guidelines.
Okay.
You still abstain from meat,
Okay.
but you can have 3 full meals.
It's not as restrictive.
Not as restrictive, no.
Okay.
The Hallow article also gives specific age requirements.
Okay.
Fasting on Ash Wednesday and Good Friday is required for Catholics aged 18 to 59.
Okay, so like adults, basically.
Yeah, adults in reasonable health.
So-
Abstaining from meat on Fridays applies to those 14 and older.
Okay, so teenagers and up.
Yeah, and they emphasize the importance of parents teaching younger children about it.
Right, even if they're not required to fast.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's important.
It's about understanding the meaning.
Yeah.
Okay, so when does this all end?
Yeah. When can you eat meat again?
Well, Lent officially ends on Holy Thursday.
Okay.
But the Hallow article says fasting and personal commitments often continue until Easter.
Oh, so even though Lent is technically over?
Yeah, some people extend it.
Okay.
They reference a papal document that encourages this continued preparation
For Easter.
for Easter.
Okay.
Now, there's also clarification about Good Friday,
Okay.
even though it's part of the Easter Triduum.
The 3 holiest days.
Right. Abstaining from meat is still the best practice.
It's like all other Fridays in Lent.
Exactly. The Hallow article also answers some common questions.
Okay, good. Because I have some.
Oh, like what?
Well, like what about Sundays during Lent?
Oh, yeah. They explicitly say Sundays are not for fasting or abstinence.
So you can eat whatever you want.
Yeah, you can indulge.
Okay.
Any sacrifices on Sundays are up to you.
Okay, cool.
They also talk about fish fries.
Oh, yeah. Those are popular during Lent.
Yeah, they say they're generally acceptable.
Because it's fish, not meat.
Right.
Okay.
But they suggest keeping it modest.
Yeah, don't go overboard.
Exactly. And they clarify that abstinence in this context means abstaining from meat specifically.
Right, not like abstaining from everything.
Not from everything, just meat.
Okay, good clarification.
And they also talk about liquids.
Oh, yeah, like what can you drink?
Right. So the normal rules for fasting before communion still apply.
Okay, so like an hour before Mass.
Yeah,
No food or drink except water.
exactly.
Okay.
But outside of that, there are no specific rules about coffee, tea, or soda.
So your morning coffee is safe.
Coffee is safe.
Okay, good.
But they do say smoothies that are like a meal would be considered food.
Okay, so if it's substantial.
If it's a meal replacement.
Okay.
And finally, alcohol.
Oh, yeah, what about that?
The church doesn't have specific rules about alcohol during Lent.
So it's up to you.
Up to your own discretion and commitment to the spirit of the season.
Okay, so if you want to give it up, you can,
If you want to,
but you don't have to.
you don't have to.
Okay.
So we've looked at these 2 approaches.
Yep.
What are your takeaways?
Well, I think it's interesting that both emphasize drawing closer to God.
Right. Even though they come at it from different angles.
Yeah, different theological frameworks,
Yeah.
but the goal is the same.
It's about that spiritual connection.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the way they define fasting and when to do it is totally different.
Totally different. Yeah.
Catholicism is very specific, tied to the liturgical calendar.
Right. Very structured.
Yeah. Whereas the other approach is more flexible, purpose-driven.
Exactly. You do it when you feel called to.
Right.
For a specific reason.
Yeah, and the rules around food are also very different.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Catholicism is super detailed about what you can and can't eat.
Right down to the size of your meals.
Exactly.
Well, the other approach is just like, don't eat.
Just stop eating.
Yeah.
It's a much broader approach.
Yeah. But there's some similarities too.
Like what?
Well, both emphasize the personal and private nature of fasting.
Oh, yeah, that was a key point in the Impact Video Ministries video.
Yeah, and it seems like even in Catholicism, although it's communal,
Right.
it's still ultimately a personal commitment.
You're doing it for your own relationship with God.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And both connect fasting with prayer and spiritual focus.
Right. It's not just about deprivation.
Yeah, it's about what you're turning towards.
Exactly.
Okay, so to sum it all up,
Yeah.
fasting, as presented in these sources, is about spiritual growth and drawing closer to God.
The big takeaway.
Yeah.
And even though the guidelines and interpretations vary.
Right. Like we saw with the Christian and Catholic approaches,
Mm-hmm.
the core principles are the same.
Self-denial and intentional focus on faith.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So for our listeners who are trying to understand this without getting overwhelmed,
Right.
we hope this has been helpful.
We hope it's provided some clarity
Yeah.
on these different approaches.
Yeah. And finally,
Yeah.
after hearing all this,
Yeah.
what does this concept of intentional self-denial for a greater purpose,
Mm-hmm.
what does that mean for you?
In your own life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Regardless of your beliefs or practices.
Exactly.
This could be a starting point for some personal reflection.
Food for thought.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right, thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Thanks, everyone.
See you next time.